Does he understand why the people of these islands, especially those of us in Scotland, treat him with such contempt? Mr Speaker, before the election, this Prime Minister said he would lower energy bills by £300. Since he took office, they've gone up by £149. He said he would protect the winter fuel payment, but now he's in power, he's stripped it off our pensioners. And he said he lined up for many photos with waspy women, saying he'd have their backs, and he's just betrayed them in the most scandalous way possible. This is now the defining characteristic of this one-trick phony Prime Minister who says one thing and does another. In Scotland, the SNP are 16 points ahead in the polls. Does he understand? Does he understand why the people of these islands, especially those of us in Scotland, treat him with such contempt?
They used to ask those questions. They used to ask those questions from this sort of area with very many MPs not so long ago. That all changed in July, and he's now carping from right up there. We can hardly hear him.
Good day and welcome back to the British Report channel. We have witnessed a political masterclass in destruction that has utterly exposed and humiliated Prime Minister Keir Starmer on live national television, confirming once and for all that his fragile premiership is running on borrowed time. The man who delivered this political annihilation is, of course, the leader of Reform UK, Nigel Farage, who, in a magnificent display of populist fury, ripped into Sir Keir Starmer after his insurgent party was deliberately and cynically snubbed in the latest round of House of Lords peerage nominations. Starmer, the man who pledged to clean up politics, has instead been exposed as a hypocrite, packing the unelected upper chamber with 25 new Labour peers, many of them former aides and loyalists, while giving Reform UK, the party leading national opinion polls, a grand total of absolutely none. This is not merely a political oversight, it is a declaration of war by the establishment against the people's choice. A snub that Farage has expertly weaponised to declare that Starmer has crashed out of any claim to integrity. The very basis of the Prime Minister's latest act of cronyism is a naked power grab. Labour appointed 25 new life peers, including figures like Matthew Doyle, a former No 10 Director of Communications, and Katie Martin, a former Chief of Staff to Chancellor Rachel Reeves, specifically to strengthen his hand in the House of Lords. The government has faced staunch opposition from the upper chamber on key legislation, most notably the flagship Workers' Rights Bill, and Starmer's response is not to reform the Lords, a pledge he has repeatedly made, but to stack it with his own loyalists. This brazen move brings the number of peers appointed by Starmer to 62, reinforcing the Conservatives' accusation that he is engaged in the same stuffing of the Lords he once condemned. But the ultimate target of Farage's attack is the hypocrisy of rewarding the political class while intentionally locking out the voice of the vast movement he leads. Speaking on his GB News show, Farage delivered the killing blow, first mocking the blatant cronyism before landing the punch on Starmer's character. He highlighted the glaring democratic disparity. It's House of Lords time. And guess what? 25 Labour peers have been appointed, 5 Liberal Democrats and 3 Conservatives. But I wonder, is Keir Starmer being a hypocrite? He continued contrasting this with his own party. And guess what? I wonder how many peers Reform got. Absolutely none. The fact we've led the last 150 polls, the fact that every other small party, I'd say small by House of Commons representation, does have representation of the Lords. Absolutely nothing for Reform at all. The undeniable fact is that Reform UK, which received over $6.4.1 million votes in the last general election and now leads national opinion polls, is being treated as a non-entity, while smaller parties like the Greens and the Liberal Democrats, which received fewer votes, are being rewarded. Farage revealed the personal dimension of the snub, elevating the political slight into a profound moral failure on Starmer's part. I did write a very polite letter to the Prime Minister 3 months ago to make the case that we needed a voice of some kind there, and, I didn't even get the courtesy of a reply. The Reform leader then delivered the sentence that will hang over Starmer's head for the remainder of his term. That really did surprise me, because I used to think that Starmer was basically a pretty reasonable bloke with whom I just disagreed on policy. I'm not quite so sure. I think he's part of an establishment that is not only shutting down free speech, but literally wants to shut Reform out of the whole political system. Well, I think it's pretty appalling. By refusing to grant even one peerage to Reform, and worse, by refusing to even acknowledge Farage's polite letter, Starmer has effectively confirmed every accusation the populist leader has ever made, that the entire Westminster system, Labour and Conservatives alike, is a corrupt, self-serving club united solely by the goal of keeping the people's choice, Reform UK, out. This is the one thing that truly destroys Starmer's credibility. He campaigned on a platform of integrity and change, yet he is now actively engaged in constitutional sabotage, denying representation to the most popular party in the country. This act of blatant cronyism has handed Farage the ultimate narrative. He is the outsider, the voice of the people being locked out by a desperate establishment. The Prime Minister's decision is not just a tactical error. It is a fatal political misjudgment that allows Farage to declare Keir Starmer has lost his moral authority and crashed out of any claim to represent democratic fairness.